Nick, man, I wish I would have had this book when I first got into radio, because this is the kind of stuff that I would have been talking about over and over and over again on those song intros, building up that relationship even stronger with those listeners.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. And you know what? It's so eye-opening, because when you have somebody, I didn't know that Doc Holliday was a part of this journey until I read it in your words. I mean, it's stuff like this is what I love about this book.
There's so many people who have come through the Stone Pony who you would just be kind of shocked about, right? Like that Doc Holliday was out there, and then go forward and it's the Jonas Brothers, right?
Yes. I tell you what, when I first hung out with the Jonas Brothers, they were doing a movie premiere in Charlotte, and we were back behind the movie theater, and just to hang out with them, and then now to understand that they were part of the Stone Pony as well. This is what music is all about, community. And I think, isn't that what the Stone Pony was about?
Yeah, exactly. The Stone Pony really thrived on having community. It opened in 1974 when the community of Asbury Park was struggling. You know, it had just suffered from some significant racial tension and protests and riots in 1970. And when the Pony opened in 1974, there had been a lot of destruction on the west side of town, a lot of flight from the east side of town. And it left it, as Stevie Van Zandt says in the book, to us rockers, rogues, renegades, and misfits. And those musicians would form the community that would become the people that went to the Stone Pony.
Yeah.
And they wanted to do their music, right? They wanted to play R&B and soul instead of, very strict top 40 rules or disco or anything like that.
That kind of reminds me of the rules that were in Myrtle Beach as well. That it's like people went down there, to get the R&B, to get the soul, and to call it beach music and everything. I mean, there's such a connection with these beach towns.
Exactly. That salty, sweaty air of a bar where, the music spills out and mixes with the sounds of the ocean. It's like perhaps over romanticized, but at the same time, it's intoxicating. Like, who doesn't want to experience that? And when you're there, your guard's down a little bit. You're there to relax and maybe experience something new or try it. And I think that's what allows a lot of these beach town bars to really develop their own sound.
How did you develop the confidence to be able to sit back on the sidelines and watch all of this play out? I mean, you must have heard something in your heart, or you were watching the reaction of the people, but something kept you in that game day and night after night.
It's really, for me, it was the I almost call it an addiction to live music at the Pony, right? I find live music to be life-giving, and it's my favorite thing to experience. But it's another level to experience at the Stone Pony when there's that added level of unpredictability, of spontaneity, that you don't exactly know what's going to happen. There's the shirts around town that say Bruce might show up, and there is always that 1% chance that maybe he will. And he's done it with so many bands, right? It's not just if Southside's playing or Bon Jovi's playing. It could be if Social Distortion's playing, he hops up. Or the Gaslight Anthem, right? He's come out and played with. Bands you wouldn't necessarily think oh, Bruce is going to come out here. But it also bleeds into every artist. You'd see the Bouncing Souls in their Christmas shows, and they'd have all sorts of guest artists, like Frank from My Chem or, Heath from Midtown. It always had this something special could happen tonight, and that would bring you out, and you'd have that little anticipation in the back of your head that would create a little bit more energy. And even if it didn't happen, you still had an amazing show.
You're talking about Bruce Springsteen, and I'll tell you what, he showed up in your book right there in the foreword. My thing with Springsteen is that it took me 4 live shows to finally fall in love with what he does on that stage. But it took 4 live performances, which to me is 16 to 17 hours.
Yeah, these are not forgotten.
But his forward really sets up the transparency in this book and the relationship that readers are going to have with everything that you have put in here.
Yeah, I think the relationship that Bruce has with the Pony is kind of a microcosm that so many people would have with the Pony, and what's kept it alive for so long. And it's this sense of community, this sense of always coming home and being proud of and interested in your home and sustaining a scene, right? Like Bruce says, when he was experiencing his biggest success, after Born in the USA, it's like him, Michael Jackson, and Prince are the most famous people in America. Yet he's not going to LA. He's not going to New York City to live. He's still coming home, playing in pickup softball games against the bartenders at his home bar and showing up. And that's just such a distinct thing that I think defines how a lot of us from New Jersey feel, right? Like Southside calls it, I can't believe, we named our band after the joke city and the joke state of the entire country. Experiences with the Pony that, would trickle down to a band like the Jonas Brothers who, when they're experiencing their mega success, still come back in 2019 to play the Pony.
There could be readers in California, Vancouver, even here in the South in Charlotte, and they think of the Stone Pony. But man, I'll tell you what, the pictures in this book really give us what it's all about. It's no longer what's tucked away inside our imaginations. It's you give us the real deal.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to be able to connect with some locals in the 70s who were, bringing their camera everywhere they went. So they had some very cool candid shots of, Springsteen and Southside and the Pony. And then Danny Clinch is, one of the best photographers in the world right now. He's photographed everyone from Bruce Springsteen to Jason Isbell to like SZA. And then he's also from Asbury Park, and his gallery's in Asbury Park. So I was very lucky to have, probably the best rock and roll photographer alive right now, give me photos from his personal archive to help bring this to life.
Speaking of bringing things to life, the layout of the story, was that your editor's idea to do it in this direction, where each chapter, it just shows how every one of them had their own experience, and this is what it was?
So I always wanted to do this as an oral history and break it up into chapters as I did, because I thought when you have a place that has such a long history with so many people who come through it, everyone can kind of relate to each other. And you get that vibe from an oral history where you feel like, you're in the middle of the room and everyone's going down memory lane together. So allowing everyone to share their own stories without me rewriting them or changing them in any way, but putting them together, I think really kind of helps put you in the walls there, but then also, show the relationships between these artists.
Well, you're speaking my street when you say allowing them to share their own story, because that's my mantra: share your story or someone will write it for you. And you understand that to be very true.
Exactly. I think especially when you have such compelling stories too, like I can't tell Bruce Springsteen's story better than him. I can't tell Mike McCready or Tom Morello's story better than them. So the best thing you can do is just kind of turn over the mic, guide them through these stories. I really enjoyed doing a lot of these interviews because I would come to them, armed with the stories of people from the past and help trip these memories and go down memory lane with people in a way that you normally don't get to with a lot of interviews. And I think that's what helped a lot of the stories speak in the book too.
The authenticity of the way that you present the titles, I love that. It's like looking at a playlist. It's like I've gone backstage, I got that ticket, and they're going to let me walk on that stage to see that playlist. And I feel like that when I jumped into your book, I was like, oh, am I supposed to be here?
Exactly. You get a little bit of that backstage feeling, right? And because some of the stories are just so weird and outlandish. The thought of like Springsteen and a bouncer stealing Stevie Van Zandt's car and taking it for a joyride in Belmar, 4 towns down, and then just leaving it there and being like, Stevie, your car's in Belmar, don't ask why. It's that intimacy, I think that the oral history thrives on.
One of the things, and I hope a lot of these new club owners today will learn from this book, is that there was no judgment against the genres of sound, that you respected all levels of play.
The Pony truly was, I think, because it started like this, kind of, come as you are. And so when musical genres were changing, I think probably the best example is actually in the 80s when, Springsteen was still dominant, Southside Johnny was still very famous. The bar band sound that they created, that created so many other bands like Cahoots and Shots and the Shakes, were thriving. On Tuesday nights was metal night, and a band called TT Quick was playing, and they drew a massive crowd, and they were nothing like Bruce or Southside or what Bon Jovi would even become. They were closer to like what Metallica was.
Wow.
And they had some of the best guitarists ever. Zakk Wylde, who's from New Jersey, would go there as a young teenager. And he says, everyone I've played with in my life, They probably went to Berkeley or they went to Juilliard for their musical training. I went to the Stone Pony and I watched T.T. Quick. And this was a different brand of music that the Pony saw was thriving and said, we're not going by convention and saying on Tuesday nights, we need a top 40 band or we need something that every other bar does to bring people in. We'll let the people decide and tell us what they like. And they've done that forever.
In your journey of bringing everything to life at the Stone Pony, did you ever meet up with other, club owners, such as like Amos's down here in Charlotte, where it's like, okay, what are you guys doing right that we can do right in our own world?
Do you mean like were other musicians like meeting backstage and saying, hey, do you want to come on tonight or things like that?
Club owners and club managers, only because I remember that when 95.1 put together a nightclub back in the 90s, it was the toughest dang journey that we were even a part of. Because, it's not an easy business. And where is the leadership? And I would look at someone like you and say, please tell me what I'm doing wrong.
Well, I think what helped the Pony was, it opened up in this very seat of the pants way. So for those first, 12 years, it was just completely organic. It was the musicians kind of saying like, we want to do this. And the owner saying, okay. And then seeing the crowds work. And then when national acts start coming, they had the same kind of venue struggles that most others would have, but they were always committed to keeping it going and seeing what the crowds were and how they were coming. And I think they also listened a lot to the local community. So there's a very interesting relationship in the late 80s and throughout the 90s with this radio station in the area called HTG.
Yep.
And they would play music that wasn't necessarily top 40, but they saw was doing well at the Pony. So a band like Dramarama, right? They were moderately successful, but K-Rock in Los Angeles and HTG in Asbury Park played them as if they were the second coming of Bon Jovi, right? So they were all over the radio. So when Dramarama played the Stone Pony, it packed out and sold out in minutes. And they listened to what was working at the Pony, and the Pony also listened to what was working on HTG. And it's a really interesting microcosm. I'm not sure it could be recreated everywhere, right? But when you had this town that is both close to New York and Philly, but also far from New York and Philly, and they had their own radio station and they had their own community, they were able to kind of see it through together.
All right, business question for you. Let's just say that Eric Clapton plays on a live stage and he comes into the Stone Pony. Do you have to pay him money?
Well, if you're following the Bruce Springsteen rule, no.
Okay. Okay.
Bruce showed up at the Pony all the time, never with a guitar, never with an assumption, was never billed, was never paid. It was all about, kind of playing for the joy. And a lot of artists who came throughout the eras, they just came to play. When Boz Scaggs wandered over from Convention Hall, it wasn't to try and snag another gig. It was to jam with people who were doing something cool and party through the night, because that's what happened there. And that's what he did.
Wow. Now, this can't stay wrapped up just inside a beautiful book, the beautiful book that it is. Is there going to be some sort of rockumentary? Because you've got to have some film on this.
Most of my interviews, are just recorded on my iPhone or my slightly fancier microphone. I'm a print journalist. I'm not very good with lighting and everything, but I do think, there's definitely ways that we could bring this to life in other ways. And I think there's small slivers too that could be spun off in a fascinating way, like the very extremely antagonistic relationship between the Pony owners and the bikers. It's like a turf war that would define major cities or gang violence. It was there was one night where Jack, the founder and owner, shut down the bar because he heard the bikers were coming to burn him out, and he posted up on the roof with AK-47s and grenades and start a war. What rock club has an owner with an arsenal looking to take down a version of the Hells Angels? So there's so many of these microcosm stories within the book too that I really think could be fun to go a little bit deeper on when you get into the drama of it.
It's quite the experience, and I'll tell you what, I'm the cheater in the book in the way that I didn't go chapter after chapter. I would chapter, then I would jump up 12 chapters. I would go into all these different directions, and I have a feeling that a lot of other readers are going to do the same thing.
Well, I hope so. I hope each chapter can kind of stay at least some point in its own. Why we were able to, just excerpt a chapter in Rolling Stone before the book came out, and I wrote little introductions to try and orient everyone before it came through. And the familiar names like a Bruce Springsteen or a Stevie Van Zandt throughout most chapters kind of helps there too.
Wow! Please come back to the show anytime in the future. There's a lot more rock and roll music and history it left inside of you, sir.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to come back.
You bet. You be brilliant today, okay?
You too. Thank you.